So Menno, so happy to have you here. We're going to talk a little bit
Pleasure.
today about the overuse of carbohydrates, which you are an expert in, and I think you wrote the best paper I've ever read on that subject. Also, in case I forget, The Science of Self-Control is your book, and just started it, and it looks totally rad. Also, pretty much everybody I know in who's anywhere in nutrition space that talks about having to control your appetite has recommended your book. So your book is like coming at me
Nice.
like in all directions. So happy to have you.
Nice. Yeah. And thank you very much for the compliment.
Yeah.
So
Well, you wrote
both were,
it's awesome.
yeah, both took a long time, but I'm really pleased with the results and the reception so far.
So my first question, this was a meta-analysis. Was this your first meta-analysis?
First systematic review that we published. We didn't run the stats on the meta officially, but we made it a full systematic review.
Sure.
I didn't think it was worth using, like actually going into what's statistically significant because the findings were so overwhelming that, and for example, for the control of calories versus not, a clear finding was literally all of the studies finding carbohydrates have benefits for performance are not calorie controlled. So we cannot say whether it was the calories or the carbohydrates that really make them perform better, like all of them. So there isn't a single study, literally, there isn't a single study, a high quality study that's calorie controlled between groups that finds that a higher carbohydrate intake outperforms a lower carbohydrate intake for strength performance or muscle growth for that matter.
That's shocking.
Yeah, especially because there have been numerous papers, and this is also why I wanted to write the review. Numerous papers, and I'm sure you know so many experts, many of them very well-intentioned, well-read, well-educated, that recommend super high carbohydrate intakes. Like in the literature, you'll find ranges up to 10 gram per kilogram,
right.
Which I'm about 95 kilogram when bulking. So 950 grams of carbohydrates would be the recommendation for me. It's insane. Exactly.
Insane.
Absolutely insane.
Well, and you're going to get so fat eating that.
Yeah, even half of that would be wildly excessive. So,
right.
I mean, I'd have trouble even fitting that into my calories. Like that's
right.
4,000 calories just from the carbs.
How do you even fit that in your stomach through the course of a day?
Yeah, that too.
Yeah.
Well, with sushi, I would manage, but
sure, but it's and that's what got me so excited about your paper. Like I had read so many things that advocated for higher carbohydrate, and then I come across athletes all the time that they're really interested in eating high carbohydrate, mostly because, and also, let's be honest, they're not excited about eating more salads. Yeah, they want dense carbohydrates.
Yeah, always starches.
Yeah, so it's like, they might call that flexible or whatever, but it's like you're just eating garbage and you're going to look like garbage and feel like garbage because that's not what your body needs. And so when you came out with your paper, just the small amount of carbohydrates and the high impact that can have, like you just really don't need that much. And in fact, I mean, if somebody wants to stay in ketosis, they probably can and still eat that small amount of carbohydrate. Now, some people don't care about that. Some people think that's, the most powerful thing in the world. And, maybe, but, well, no, it's not the most powerful thing in the world. It's a good thing from time to time. So I really was excited about that. Now, my book, Weightlifting is a Waste of Time, that published a little over a year ago, and I did not have your reference. When I re-edit this book, I'm putting your reference in there as opposed to the one that's there, and it said something like, and I mean, I had to just sort of pick something. And the reason I was looking to, because a little bit before I didn't recommend really any carbohydrates. I was just kind of pure carnivore. But I realized that that's unrealistic for most people. They just don't want to do it.
Yeah.
And so, how if a diet is so good nobody will do it, it's not good at all. So ultimately, like, and I mean, hey, how many physicians have you talked to? It's just like compliance. Like if the drug gives you heartburn, if the pill gives you heartburn, patient's not going to take it.
Yeah.
So, we got to find another way. And that's part of that was my, like, one of my initial experiences in medical device industry. People didn't want to take bisphosphonate drugs for their bone density losses because they had some pretty bad side effects. And then they came up with an injectable version and people still didn't feel very well. And so there was an opportunity there to have a physical medicine intervention, which is what I developed. That's OsteoStrong. It's my first thing. So I just really going back and looking at what do we actually need. And I wanted to recommend some carbohydrates just for practicality, so people would follow it, but also if we're to induce hyperplasia. So like I have people doing something that's, vasodilation type property, so they can take epimedium if they don't want to have a prescription for, like Viagra or Cialis or something like that. Because most people don't want to bother to get a prescription, but there are vasodilators out there. Nitrous oxide is another one of them. So they would do that. Then they would ingest, I had like half their body weight in grams of carbohydrate, and then do a workout. So they really overhydrate the muscle, and then they stretch. And so there's a few studies that suggest that this is going to cause muscle cells to split. And people have had some, let's see, it was Professor Jose Antonio, that was his dissertation. And so I followed along with that and recommended sort of all these things together. But I would always feel like garbage when I had that much carbohydrate. Like you'd think, based on what people tell us, oh, carbohydrates are energy. Yeah, maybe. But I mean, I know when I'm accustomed to not having a lot of carbohydrates, then I do it pre-workout, I feel awful. I have the worst workout ever. But if I have maybe 12 grams of glucose tablets, I feel great. But that's not much. And so, yeah, your paper was like, man, this is what I needed to see, because this just hadn't really been shown yet. And some of those other papers,
what we recommend in our paper.
Yeah. I mean, I recommend your paper to everybody. And I think that is probably going to be at least my like position stand on that subject, because it just doesn't make you feel like crap. Also, it's not going to affect triglycerides very much. So some of these people who are dieting, they've got higher low density lipoprotein. In fact, the highest your LDL goes is when you're fasting or just burning body fat, even through a caloric deficit. Because you're using fat as fuel, so the LDL goes up. But then when you also have high triglycerides, that's like a recipe for a stroke. So because like what happens is these people, they're trying to lose a bunch of body fat, and then let's say they decide to have like a cheat meal or whatever, and it's just massive carbohydrates. Like, wow, like I don't think that's a great idea. I think you could actually be like on the edge of triggering a stroke. Maybe I'm overreactive about that, but I know that following your recommendation, no one's going to have an issue with that. Does that make sense?
I think the our recommendations are pretty similar in the sense that we do recommend some carbs because it's more to be safe than sorry, and also practical. So in the paper we recommend 15 gram net carbs pre-workout, which is not much. It's very easy to, and it doesn't even have to be like glucose tablets. A lot of people always like go to these things, and it can definitely work. But it can even be fruit, vegetables,
sure,
like anything that's
in my book. I recommend
do the job.
Rice. Yeah,
right.
Because everybody can find rice. I don't care where the hell you are.
Pretty much, it'll pretty much ends up as glucose anyway in the body.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's kind of what I was going for. And then, for the people who are really concerned about oxalates, like rice really doesn't have that. There's not a lot of anti-nutrients in rice. So yeah, I feel like that's
there's interesting research that white rice actually results in higher protein balance than whole grain rice. And that's
Right.
likely because of the anti-nutrients that reduce the protein absorption.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. I didn't know what to make of that study, and I didn't know whether to like post it to the fans, because it's like, am I just going to confuse everybody here? Sometimes like it's like something really important, but if I say rice, people are like, okay, it's rice. But then if I go into the weeds and explain, it's like, am I just going to like have people look at all this stuff and go, fuck it, I'll just go buy weight gainer.
Yeah, I mean, you don't need rice, you don't need weight gainer. It can be
no.
Yeah.
Oh, weight gainer is horrible. I don't even know why they still make that. I mean,
because people buy it.
You can sell
you can sell people the biggest crap for the price of steak, and you call it weight gainer. And
yeah, it's an absolute tragedy. What is sold in nutrition space? Now, one thing, so I got a little bit different take on intermittent fasting than I think some. So I tell people there may not be any magic as far as the energy deficit. Energy deficit may be the same. Now, I think there's a curveball when it comes to dry fasting, because like my calories on my basal metabolic rate plus activity is 3,300, or at least that's as good as the calculator is going to give me. I mean, who knows how right that is, but it's probably right around there. I think that when you can get aggressive with a deficit with a couple of fasted days, right? Like let's say I want to go 3.5 days fasted and then eat maintenance calories the rest of the week. Well, a 50% energy restriction over the course of a week, if you tried to do that every day, you'd have a metabolic adaptation, which means the weight loss would stop working after a period of time, but you would feel horrible. But when you're fasted, you're not hungry. So I do 72 hours. I don't do 3.5 days. But I do 72 hours dry fasted when I want to drop body fat. And like, that's awesome. But I also
think a lot of people misunderstood my last post on fasting. To me, like, fasting doesn't work. It's the study doesn't say fasting doesn't work. The study says it works because it induces an energy deficit.
Sure.
Exactly. It's I want to dispel the notion that it's magical in that regard, or that you have to fast.
Right. It's if you prefer calorie deficit, you prefer a more normal every day, then which some people would. Especially like the dry fasting is great, but if you work outside in the heat, no, you cannot do dry fasting.
Yeah, that would not be prudent.
No, I tell everybody, like, if you even get hot at your office, don't dry fast. Dry fast over the weekends or something like that. There's a study, I'm sure you've read this one. It was done in Germany by a couple of Germans and Greeks. And the name's just not coming to me right now, but it's a Greek name, so I'd probably ruin it anyway. But they did 5-day dry fasts. And there was a follow-up study where they replicated it.
That's a long fast.
Especially with no liquids.
Yeah.
And funny thing, like after a day, you just don't even think about it. I'm actually dry fasted, let's see, about 60 hours right now. And
really?
I'm fine. And I notice little things like the level of hydration, like my hands don't look as vascular as they normally do, whatever. But I did this the first time I did it, measured the volume of my urine each day, same amount of urine every day.
Sorry?
Same amount of urine every day.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. It's because it's taking the water from our only non-vascular tissue that we drag around, body fat. So it works really well. But what I think the mistake people are making is they're trying to get away with tiny fasts that don't really do anything, and then they go and eat too much. So
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, I mean, if your metabolic rate plus activities like me, like 3,300, and you just eat 3,300 calories at the end of the day, and you skip the first two meals, like you did nothing.
Yeah, that's what most people have with Ramadan, where
Yeah. Oh, and they
they
eat.
have all
They
these
like
treats,
feast
and
at night, and it's like, man,
yeah,
don't do
most people end
that.
up maintaining, which is actually still surprising considering how much junk they eat, and they still maintain their body composition.
Right. Well, yeah, it's they only have a certain window to be able to eat. So the sun has
Yeah,
to come
exactly.
down.
So they
In
do a lot of
northern
in short time.
northern living Muslims, like if you're a Muslim and you live in London, your Ramadan day is quite a bit shorter than it is in the Middle East, because it's different hemispheres, different sunlight, and so they sometimes only have like a couple hours to eat before they got to go to bed. And they're doing better because they don't have so much time to eat all the junk food they want to get in the middle of the night. Yeah, I think that's well, I mean, let's face it, they're not doing it for health. They're doing it for the religious experience. And hey, they've given us more fasting data than anybody else, because it's like 1.5 billion Muslims do it every year, and people aren't getting hurt by it. So I lean on that quite a bit. I got a lot of great references from some Middle Eastern journals. Now, of course, the Middle Eastern journals don't have the same standards that the Western journals do, but they're getting better. And then every once in a while, you see something in a Western journal, you're like, wow, like who was on the peer review team for that? Yeah, I ask myself that question a lot. I'm sure you do too. Yeah, like some of the, have you noticed like how much, now it's because of coronavirus, but we have a lot more research about just airborne viruses. And it's like, if you write a paper about an airborne virus and you pick the wrong statistical test, I don't think anyone cares. It's just like it's getting published because each journal wants the maximum amount of content about that. And so the paper quality has just gone down. Have you noticed that at all? Kind of.
I'm not an expert on viruses, but I do notice, the main thing I noticed is that there was a big slump in research. I mean, my own paper that was almost finished, we're actually doing a study on fasted training and fasting as well, and with Andy Galpin. And the last cohort was like in the last weeks of being done, and then the Corona pandemic hit and the lockdowns and everything, and completely messed it up, completely confounded everything, because everyone couldn't train anymore, their whole schedules changed. So now we're still trying to rerun that cohort. So that completely messed up our study, and I know from a lot of people that's happened. So there's also been actually a downside that is often not discussed of the pandemic and the lockdowns, is the damage it did to research, because it messed up so much research.
Sure. Oh, anything that was at a university, now all of a sudden people can't go to the university.
Yeah.
I had that challenge also. There's a couple of things that I'm trying to have done, and when they close a university, it's like, it's never like the sports performance department, the nutrition department, the endocrinology department. They don't call and say, yeah, don't do that. They just have to do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was annoying. Well, now have you been in Portugal the entire time during coronavirus?
No. Mostly in Brazil and Mexico, but I've had 4 lockdowns in various countries.
Yeah.
We won't. I think it's on the way out. So
we won't talk about the research on lockdowns. When you finish that meta-analysis or the systematic review, was there anything that you wished you had got in there? That, I mean, like you said, there are no metrics on what the calorie controls were, and so that's like a gigantic question mark. But I mean, you couldn't do anything about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fact that it's still overwhelmingly in favor against carbs. So no matter how you look at the research, no matter which category we looked at, which time frame, the majority of studies found no beneficial effects on higher carb intakes. And then you're looking at a few categories where I think there could be an actual influence of carbs, not just a psychological one, but an actual one. And that's basically people that train twice a day, people that athletes that do endurance and strength training, people that do more than 10 sets per muscle group per session, which is interestingly, if you do like the more bro kind of workouts, old school splits, then actually you might need the carbs a little bit. It's not a big difference, but it might have an effect. Again, though, in the only calorie controlled study by Mitchell et al., they found no effect even up to 15 sets for one muscle group. So it's, but it's not a category I'm particularly interested in because I'm generally a proponent of higher frequency training.
Yeah, me neither.
So
like,
yeah, I don't have many clients
let it recover.
Yeah, I don't have my clients do like 15 plus sets per muscle group per session anyway. So
yeah, that's even higher volume than I go, or than that we talk about. But yeah, part of that reason. So like, if someone wants to be low carbohydrate, you know, they do 20-minute weight workouts 6 days a week. You talk about replenishing glycogen in pretty much the first, I think you mentioned like 15 grams of like, let's say glucose or a carbohydrate is going to convert into glucose. You're really kind of there.
yeah,
Is that correct?
Yeah, I think so, because we have 3 direct studies on sort of the dose response. And overall in the literature, it's very clear there's no dose response effect, which is a big red flag, right? The idea is that you need the carbs for energy, and therefore you would expect that the more carbs you eat, the more energy you have, thus the better you perform. But it doesn't pan out that way at all. Like there is no dose response effect in the literature. Right. And that's because you typically just don't deplete enough glycogen during your workouts. The highest reported value in the entire literature, and there's a lot of papers, is 41%. And so in one session, you're almost never going to burn through all of your glycogen. Now, maybe if you're going into the 15 plus set range, then you might deplete glycogen levels enough in some of your type 2 muscle fibers. But again, I think that's not a category people shouldn't train anyway. So it's not super practical. And then afterwards, if you look at the values of glycogen resynthesis, which can occur from the glycerol backbone of triglycerides, or via the Cori cycle, where the lactate, the pump that you get during workouts, there's a lot of lactate production. It can effectively be recycled back to glucose. So the body has very effective mechanisms in place to resynthesize glycogen without actually needing dietary carbohydrates.
Sure.
And then if you look at the levels that glycogen resynthesis occurs in people that are even fasted, like completely fasted, it's still within the range where you say, oh, look, after a normal workout, this would take about 24 hours to recover. So even if you're training a muscle every day, which I do in some high frequency programs, there's still complete resynthesis. And that's why if you look at the studies, the longer term studies, actually the evidence became more and more convincing. Like the longer the time frame you look at in research studies, the more convincing the evidence is there's no effect whatsoever. I think in our long-term category of studies up to 3 months, which is about as long as most of these studies go, because you typically have college athletes and whatever. It's I think it was 17 studies, 15 found no benefit. And then it was actually 1-to-1. One found a benefit of higher carbs and one actually favored lower carbs. So cancel that out. It's basically a complete wash, like no evidence for in favor of higher carbohydrate intakes.
And I know, sorry, I got a little allergy problem here. I live in California. We get a lot of plants and they make a lot of pollen. So, God, that's such a breath of fresh air, because so many people who, I mean, really, they just want to eat, candy. Like, whatever. Like I all the time somebody will, just this morning somebody posted like on our forum, the X3 users group forum, they posted something about like donuts. Like last thing I would eat. What? Like, and the problem with the donut isn't just if you want to have one donut, can you have one donut? I suppose, but then you're going to want to eat the rest of them too. You're not going to want to eat one. And it's just, switches your insulin on in a way it's so upregulated so quickly that you lose control, and that's when people
that's exactly what I talk about in my book, actually, where people think they have a very naive notion of food cravings, where they feel like if you eat a little bit, the craving's gone. But actually it's the opposite. The best way to kill a craving is to starve it. Like you don't eat something and then the craving disappears, and research is super clear on this, that people that eat low carb, for example, they lose their carb cravings because they never eat them. Whereas if you eat a carb, and it doesn't matter how much you eat, that's another interesting finding. If you eat 1 donut or you eat 10 donuts, the increase in cravings for donuts is actually the same. Because it's not about the physical process of consuming it. It's about the fact that you trigger the mental representation. You're now thinking of donuts again. You re-trigger the taste of donuts. So next time you think of what to eat, donuts come up. Whereas if you never have donuts, for you, for example, if you think about what to eat, it's not like you're going to think, oh, shall I eat a donut? No, it doesn't even cross your mind because you never eat it.
Yeah, I tell people, like, don't look at that as food. Like, that's not food. That's designed to be addictive. And like, here's another question. This may actually be, I just thought of this, but this may be one of the more important ones. How addictive are carbohydrates by comparison to, let's say, some recreational drugs? So there's some literature out there. I posted one on just a study on Instagram that showed that sugar has many of the similar addictive properties, and the compliance with avoiding is about as bad between cocaine and carbohydrates. And man, I got a lot of angry people coming at me about that. And how dare you, like, eating an apple is not the same as, it's like, all right, well, an apple and a donut are not the same either.
Yeah.
So
there's a big difference there.
I mean, there's that, but what do you think about those addictive properties? Is that accurate, or is there?
Well, I studied psychology, so I generally stick to the very narrow definition of an addiction in terms of, as that's what occurs with cocaine, with dopamine desensitization, decreased serotonin levels, and that doesn't occur with food. So I'd say that there's actually no food that's addictive in the strict medical sense, but we can reinforcing value. And there was a recent study that actually found that carbohydrates have greater reinforcing value and influence the brain reward pathways more than fats. But overall, I think it's more about palatability. I think starches, because when we're talking about carbs, right, and you say like big difference between apple and a donut, I think nobody gets addicted to cauliflower or even apples for that matter. So it's more about the palatability, where starches are just so palatable that people want to eat them, and they generally have low self-control, and they're not capable of managing their self-control, which is much more important than having it, I think. And as a result, they're constantly eating starches. So I wouldn't say they're addictive, but they are very easy to overeat on. Everybody likes them. They're very easy to eat. And I noticed it as well after a long period of having basically no starches at all. I started having some starches again. And I found out that I was sort of craving them, even though I didn't like them. Like as a kid already, I thought, I don't really get why people eat pasta, because like pasta itself has barely any taste, right? Rice too.
It's almost like
just plain rice, plain pasta. Exactly. It's like cardboard. I mean, if you cook it well and everything, has a little bit of taste, but not much, not like meat.
Yeah, but it's usually the meat sauce you put on it that's what you
exactly want. So it doesn't even taste good on its own. It's mostly sort of the texture, and I don't know, just so very easy to eat, and just hyper palatable. So I think that's the issue mostly.
I like that. Right. Like certain things. I know when people switch over to a more kind of carnivore type nutrition, they really miss crunchy stuff.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
food that
Crunchy
has
stuff is a tough one.
it is
I have
because
that
there's really
all the time
nothing you
from
can say to
clients.
them.
Exactly. It's crunchy by definition means super calorically dense, because
Yeah.
crunchy means it's devoid of all fluids. So you're left with pure energy. So if people say I want something crunchy, then it's basically, unless your definition of crunchy includes like, cruciferous vegetables or something, which are also
Right.
crunchy, but they're more like watery crunchy.
Mhm.
Then you're pretty much out of luck. And the only way to get over that is not to have crunchy stuff anymore, because it's unnatural. Like crunchy stuff doesn't really exist in nature. Like maybe nuts are as close as it gets, or like I said, certain vegetables.
Right.
So like the processed crap that we now have in supermarkets and everything,
Yeah.
it's completely unnatural. So there's no
Right.
way to tell people like, oh, yeah, you can have crunchy stuff and eat as much as you want. It's going to be healthy or whatever.
It's not. Well, what I notice is like people go for, health bars that are made out of like nuts that are compressed together with, they say it's honey, but it's not sticky. So it's really like 1% honey and 99% caramel, so it's just like, just a sugar
Pure energy.
Yeah, it's like that's not good for you. Don't be fooled just because it says nature on the package. No.
Yeah, even the protein bars, and the issue is, like it kind of defeats the point of, unless you're consuming it for the energy. Like if you're a high level athlete or something, and you just need the calories.
Mhm.
But for most people, the issue is when you're bringing a bar somewhere to eat, the issue is you want to satiate yourself, so that you're not hungry. But those bars don't do it at all. And protein bars actually have the same issue, where with a protein bar, if they're nice protein bars, you can eat 10, and then you still overeat.
Yeah.
And if they're not nice protein bars, then you ate something that you didn't like, which wasn't healthy, because most protein bars are also crap.
Yeah.
And then you got your protein in, okay, great, but you're still hungry. So good chance you're still going to overeat.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of protein powders that they put like what they call a minimal amount of carbohydrates, but then you look at the package and it's like, how is that minimal?
Yeah,
it's like
that ain't chicken.
40 grams of sugar in one serving. Like that's not minimal. Like you went out of your way to put as much in there. And here's another problem I run into is a lot of people think supplements should taste like candy. Yeah, I mean, if you have like a high quality protein, like I one of the products that I manufacture and sell is it's called Fortigen. It's an essential amino acid, sort of MAP ratio. It's a little bit sweetened with stevia. It doesn't taste like a delicious dessert you'd have at a fancy restaurant. It doesn't taste bad either, but I notice that people really want everything to taste, like candy. And boy, that's just a wrong mentality, I think.
Yeah, it's funny with caffeine. I recommend anhydrous caffeine to a lot of people because it's super cheap. It's very like pure caffeine, basically, anhydrous caffeine. And it's in research the most effective way to ingest caffeine, like to enhance performance. It's more effective than coffee or other forms.
Okay.
And but people really don't like it. You can have it in pills, but if you even get the pill half open, or I use powder because it's literally like free. And you do need to dose it accurately, but you use a small spoon or whatever measuring scale. And the thing is, it's disgusting. It's like, it's not just bad, it's absolutely disgusting. And it makes you wonder, say decaffeinated caffeine is so much better than caffeinated caffeine. Because if you taste pure caffeine, it is really bad, like worse than paracetamol bad. It's like a level of bitter that's does not exist in nature.
Whoa. Okay. Now, how many,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if it's equivalent to, what we would drink. Like I went caffeine free for about 6 months and then reintroduced, and I'll have maybe like 100 milligrams of caffeine in the morning.
Yeah, I recommend the same.
Yeah. Yeah. Because once you desensitize and reintroduce it, just a tiny bit does exactly what a lot used to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. So
think
real small
The
amount.
vast majority of people are massively like alcohol, actually, like by medical terms, most people or many people are alcoholics, and a lot of people are addicted to caffeine. And or again, like caffeine addiction is again a little bit fake, but you have the withdrawal symptoms afterwards if they don't take it, and there's big tolerance. So tolerance and withdrawal are typically characterized as two big symptoms of actual addiction. But then nobody wants to hear that, And it's in caffeine, it's probably as benign as it gets for an addiction. So it's not as big of a problem as other types of addictions. But still, I think a lot of people would be better off moderating their consumption a lot more and using it strategically rather than just living out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's something that if you use it when you need it, it's wonderful. If you just use it all the time, then it's really not doing much. So,
yeah, that's another thing with supplement mentality where people have. So I'm a proponent of Phenibut, for example. I think it's useful to reduce anxiety. One of the few supplements. It's still a supplement. It's basically a drug, but it's still characterized as a supplement in many places, although increasingly harder to get. But it actually works. Like it decreases anxiety. And then people ask me like, okay, like how much can I take? Do I just take it every day? And it's like, no, it's a drug. Like when do you take it? When do you take an anxiety lowering drug? When you want less anxiety.
Yeah,
exactly. Like if you're going public speaking, maybe you want a little bit more, but if you're just going to sit home on the couch and watch Netflix, you should not need an anxiety lowering drug.
Also, if Netflix gives you anxiety, you might need to talk to a therapist. Yeah. It's supposed to be entertainment. Yeah. We got an anxiety problem in society now too.
Well, after COVID, we have a lot of mental health issues. I think the statistics show that over 50% of the population had what are psychologically significant mental health issues. Not like depression, but a lot of people had loneliness and a lot of issues.
Wow. How do people come out of that?
Well, no more lockdowns definitely helps.
Yeah.
But just getting back into your normal life, mainly.
People need to be around other people. Like, I mean, psychology is not my field, but I have read that very many times. Like you can't.
Yeah, it's literal. It's one of the most shocking findings was in World War II, I think it was. They did experiments. I'm not sure if it was the Nazis or other researchers, probably the Nazis. They had experiments on babies where they didn't give them any human attention. They just, they made sure they were well fed. They basically have them raised by robots. And the majority of those babies died. Like they flat out died. And that's an insane like finding, right?
I don't think the Allies.
Yeah. But that's an insane finding, right? It's like human beings, or at least babies, die despite being amply physically taken care of, just because they lack any social stimulus. It's crazy.
That is crazy. Damn. I mean, you think about when they put like prisoners in solitary confinement. I read one of those papers. It just seemed like it would be interesting to me. And those people were just tortured. Like apparently that's the worst thing you can do to somebody. Like as far as
I can imagine.
Yeah. Very interesting. During coronavirus, people were using their X3s at home, and they still didn't have that social interaction because it's like, they didn't have to go to the gym because they had an X3 at home, which is great, but they still need it. So I think some of them started getting together and doing X3 together, like 2 or 3 guys at, one guy's house. So I think that helps. That was a thing that was discussed on the discussion board. But of course, I didn't want it to become too popular of a subject, because then it's like, was Facebook going to shut me down for that? That was just sort of an interesting, you got to be careful. Like, sometimes you don't know if you're breaking the rules, because they just decided to make a new rule based on what they saw you were doing.
I guess they could do like, you're promoting social gatherings.
Yeah, right. Like, I didn't want anyone to like accuse, that, but it did not end up being that big of a problem, because there was always somebody who was like having a concert, or something really egregious. So it was like that was the things that people were complaining about. They weren't complaining about,
including government officials in every possible country.
Yeah, it's great when you see the officials like not wearing masks at a social gathering right in the middle of the pandemic. Yep. Yeah. It was very embarrassing for them, or at least it should have been. And it was pretty much the same like worldwide, like governments everywhere.
In Sao Paulo, where I was at the time for, I think it was Christmas and New Year, the governor locked up the state. And people joked, like, most people lock up their home before they leave, and he locks up the state. And then he went to Miami without a lockdown, and he just went there to have a holiday.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, he's probably not going to get reelected.
Well, unfortunately, I'm not sure about that. He might. There's actually even a chance he could become president.
Oh,
it's just people forget quickly, and many people. Yeah, it depends what the popular news channels show, because CNN and everything. There are lots of things that happen they would just never even cover.
Oh, okay, yeah, it's just like CNN here.
Yeah,
like very selective coverage. Depends on who they like. They don't like him. Like if Trump did that, it would be like front page of every paper. But if somebody else did that they like, it's just like didn't happen. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, this is great, man. I mean, I got all my my questions answered. I gotta send you a copy of Weightlifting is a Waste of Time. I'm reading your book, so I feel like I'm gonna have a lot of questions. Maybe we can do this again. I can like write down a bunch of questions about what I get from your book, and I'll send you mine. I'm sure you'll have a lot of stuff. Well, you're familiar with variable resistance, so this is not going to be like a big curveball. And also, I try and point out, like, the title was meant to really get people's attention. Weightlifting is a waste of time. Like, hundreds of thousands of people bought the book. If I had called it like the X3 method or something, like, nobody would have bought it. It's just like, what's that? I don't care. So the graphic on the cover of your book is that kind of good marketing. Like, it's an elephant. I wish I had the copy of the book. It's at my place. But there's like the teeter-totter, where there's an elephant and then a brain on the other end. And so it's like, we got to get this.
The brain's heavier than the elephant is the metaphor, which sort of is to say that you can, like, being smarter is more important than being strong, which is a big part of the book, which is showing research even that it's not about having self-control and having a lot of discipline. It's much more about being smart with it and not having to rely on it. If you look, for example, more successful students, or in general people that are more successful in life, they rely less on self-control, even if they have more self-control. So they just avoid temptations rather than, like with what we talked about with carbs. If you're prone to find certain carbs hyperpalatable and they don't fit your diet, then it's easier actually not to eat them often, and consciously decide, like, these foods are not worth it for me, than to occasionally have them, because then you always have the temptation. And if they're in your cupboard, and if you're hungry, you're going to the supermarket, those kind of things, that's how you end up buying it. If you end up buying it, you're going to end up eating it.
Right. Like, I have, when you go to my house, like, all that's in the refrigerator. Like I don't keep
Mhm.
meat very long because I eat it quick. It's just steak. I don't really
Right.
have anything else. I have beef stock if I'm gonna do like rice, because I'll cook the rice in the beef stock. That's an amazing flavor, and I get a little bit of rice. I do that right after a workout if I don't do the pre-workout carbohydrates, but like that's like it. Like I don't have snack foods because
Mhm.
I eat them.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
They might have a total bodybuilder fridge, like only a few food items, more variety than just meat, but just a few food items and then lots of oil, and then Tupperware containers with prepped food.
Yep. Yeah, that's perfect. I love it. All right, man. Well, thanks. I'm gonna be in touch about the book, and let's do this again. This
Mhm.
was fun.
Sure. My pleasure. Let's talk
All
again.
right,
All right.
Dr.
Good to see
Henselman.
you. See
Thank
you.
you. Awesome. All right. Have a good day.